What's up, everybody? It's your boy JR Storm, and we are under new beginnings here at the J-Rock Show. From now on, we are rocking a two-man crew, me and my boy JK Candell. How are we doing, my brother?
I'm great, J-Rock. It's been nice being on SimWorld today the last 2 days. And now I'm here. I love talking some SimWorld U. I haven't really had the chance to do so lately outside of a couple of articles I have planned. So I'm excited to be on here full time to kind of spread the wings a bit.
Yeah, definitely. Going to be exciting times here on the J-Rock Show and with SimWorld U starting up. And, I want to start a little SimWorld U conference preview series. And what better way to start off with the ACC than by starting off with Coach Jon Scheyer's Duke Blue Devils.
Duke is such an interesting case. They have 4 newcomers to SimWorld U. They have Jeremiah Minor, who is a junior in eligibility, but just gained his collegiate eligibility after his time with the G League Ignite, who have now folded. They brought in Cooper Flagg, an elite player in his own right, the best player in SimWorld Prep a season ago. In my opinion, a future SWBA number 1 pick. They brought in his teammate Viktoras Ilgauskas and then Dilson Sampaio. I love this Duke squad. They brought in some good recruits. I think Scheyer's a bit overrated of a coach because I think he's very reliant on recruiting.
Whoa. I mean, I think it's a little too soon for me to, call that on Scheyer. But then you got to look at, the shoes he had to step in and fill, though, too. You're not really going to be able to fill those type of shoes of a legend like Coach K.
Absolutely. But I think he's kind of been given people say this about Ryan Day in college football. This is the same thing with Jon Scheyer, where he was really born on third base. We haven't really had to see him do a ton of work. It was Coach K who brought in Cooper Flagg, not Jon Scheyer. So I think that's some kind of food for thought.
Definitely very much food for thought. And, continuing to look at this Duke team, you got a Sawyer Sutphin, like you said, DeMario Duval. This Duke team is going to be a very scary team to face.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think my biggest issue with them is that their guards are a bit smaller. Jeremiah Minor's 5'11", and Roderick Little's 6'1", and DeMario Duval 6'2". Like, if that's the sizes of your main perimeter players, I don't really love that. And Adolson Sampaio is 6'3", which isn't much larger. They're a bit small in the backcourt, but their front court is definitely going to do enough to keep this team alive. So I think the sky's the limit for this Duke team.
Yeah, without question. And I think, like you said, even given the maybe disadvantage size-wise Duke might have in the backcourt with their guards, no other team has a front court of guys like Viktoras Ilgauskas and Cooper Flagg to sort of, step up and help out when those guards get beat up at the top of the key. So
I think we have to give a mention to Andrei Ivanov, too, who's waiting in the wings for the Blue Devils. The two-year collegiate rule, they're going to be dirty not only this season, but next season.
That is scary to think about. That is
because there's no seniors on that roster.
That is simply scary to think about. Ilgauskas, Ivanov, and Cooper Flagg. Oh, man, that is just scary to think about. And moving on to the next school, we've got the Florida State Seminoles and Coach Leonard Hamilton's group. What stands out to you about this Seminoles squad?
Yet again, it's the lack of size. I like Leon Quinn, 6'10 junior, really good rim protector. I like Garrett Hart. He was good for the Yacht Club. So I think that in this expanded role for Garrett Hart, he could prove to be a really great find for Coach Hamilton. But outside of Hart, Ronaldo Del Orbi, and Leon Quinn, I'm not super enamored by this Florida State team at all. Hamilton's on the hot seat, and I think that's for good reason.
Yeah, I definitely see Hamilton as a guy that is, you know, if he doesn't figure it out fast, his days are numbered in Tallahassee, being on the hot seat, like you said. And this is very much an interesting group. Like you said, Garrett Hart, I think, could be one of the more underrated players in the ACC. And another guy I really like on this team, Kushal Bess. The lone senior on this team, very underrated quick guard, has a very unique skill set in the backcourt. I definitely see both him and Garrett Hart being two of, if not the two main guys on this team for Leonard Hamilton. And moving on to the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets, the big thing that stands out to me with these guys is the front court of guys like Malik Duffin and Zaza Gregorian.
I agree with you, Malik. I think they'll be good on the interior. Duffin's a great perimeter player, actually. Has a lot of potential from that area. Gregorian's more of a defensive guy. But I like Adam Mahmoud. Really good shooter. This guy that's now measuring in 6'7" after his time with the Italians. I think Mahmoud's going to have a good season in this freshman campaign. But I really like Miguel Person and Dante Walker as well. I think this GT team is solid, but nothing special going into year 2 for David Stoudemire.
Yeah, and I think it's very much a situation that it hinges on potential. Like, can Adam Mahmoud, step up and develop into, an elite offensive player? And I think a lot of their success will depend on that. But another thing about Mahmoud, I see him more as a 3 or a 4-year player who kind of becomes, if everything pans out right, one of those rare 4-year legends that we see in the ACC especially.
I think it's time to move on to Louisville, JR. Let's look at what Louisville's got going. They got a first-year head coach in Pat Kelsey. Pat Kelsey, in his last 2 seasons at Charleston, won a combined 58 games and went 58-12. They just need guys that can win games because the Kenny Payne experiment, how do I put this delicately? It was a disaster.
Simply put.
About what Louisville's potential is this upcoming season, they have a good squad. I like Kadarius Loftus, an absolute sniper. Those of you who are SimWorld Prep OGs know that he has the SimWorld Prep record for most threes in a game. I really like Pooh Lewis on the offensive end, and I love the addition of DeMarco Graham. So I think that this team could kind of has the makings of an underdog in this ACC conference. But I do think that it's the first year of a rebuild for the Cardinals, so my expectations are not through the roof.
Right, and I think it's hard for me to imagine Louisville, being world beaters this first season under Pat Kelsey. But I will say this. When you go back to the Louisville teams, from years ago that were successful, going to the Final Four, winning championships, they were tough defensively and extremely aggressive. And this team definitely fits that identity to me. And DeMarco Graham being at the forefront of it, was one of the unsung heroes for Beast of the East. He doesn't put up a lot of points, but he is an absolute dog in the paint, defensively.
I think Louisville could have a very encouraging first season with Pat Kelsey, but again, don't get your hopes up. This team could have a very wide range of outcomes. But on that note, I think it's time to talk about the defending SimWorld U national champions in Coral Gables, and that's the Miami Hurricanes with head coach Jim Larinaga. What do you think that this team is capable of this season, having brought in Kevon Jackson and Richard Hennessy, JR?
I'll take repeat for 800, Alex. I mean, simply put, Miami, very, very few situations where I would pretty much put my money on a team repeating, championships. But, I mean, Miami, they didn't lose anybody. They're bringing in two of the best incoming freshmen in all of SimWorld U in Kevon Jackson and Richard Hennessy. They return top player Jermaine McLemore. They return Edgar Fernandez and Dominic Bianco. The top offensive team in SimWorld U from a season ago is essentially the same team, adding in, two more elite players who should step in and play meaningful contributions right away.
I do have some problems with this Miami team, though. I know everyone's betting the house, betting their life savings on this team to go back-to-back. I'm not as convinced. I like Dominic Bianco, a very do-it-all guard that can do a lot of things, he's an athletic freak as well. Edgar Fernandez, sharpshooter. Kevon Jackson, athletic freak. Jermaine McLemore is a very three-tool offensive player. But from a shooting standpoint, the only guy that really jumps off the page is Edgar Fernandez. Like, my issue with Miami is that, are they going to get the production from three-point range and from the perimeter as a whole to propel this team back to a national championship?
I mean, no two seasons are ever the exact same, but I will say this. If Coach Jim Larrañaga and the Hurricanes found a way to make it work last season, I think they can definitely find a way to make it work this season and put themselves right back in that championship conversation. And now, the next school we want to talk about, the North Carolina Tar Heels and Coach Hubert Davis's squad. What stands out to you, about this bunch? I mean, they bring in Sean Hyman, Kasim Porter Jr., Kadarius Stack Jr., and Skyland Smith Jr., one of the better incoming recruiting classes in SimWorld U, in my mind.
I was about to say that. You took the words right out of my mouth, J.R. Storm. We got Sean Hyman, who looked incredible after his brother Trey was suspended. We have Kasim Porter, who was sharing the work with Losi Thomas for the Beasts, and still kind of managed to hold his own. And Kadarius Stack Jr., who was a man down low for Southeast Select. I think that's a great trio. And I think Skyland Smith Jr. could be a really good find for Hubert Davis. I really like this team with Miles James. I think he's really good, especially on the defensive end. I like Bam Wallace. I think that this team, I know a lot of the attention's going to Duke and Miami, but UNC, if they end up being crowned the champions of the ACC, I don't think anybody should be surprised. This team is stacked. The Duke-UNC rivalry is alive and well now. I think that UNC has all the makings of a championship contender.
Yeah, without question. And I think even as tough and as deep as the ACC is going to be, I think those are your clear-cut top three teams, at least in my mind, between Duke, Miami, and North Carolina.
Well said. I definitely understand what you're thinking about. But if I think it's time to move on, talk about our next school, and that is the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Notre Dame has an interesting squad coming in year two of Micah Shrewsbury. They have a great defensive big in Demir Dance. They brought in Plachi Young, their only freshman. What's this Irish team really made of?
Defensive dogs. Plain and simple. This Notre Dame team is going to have one identity, and that is an tough, experienced, defensive-minded group. And I think the concern that I have for them is on the offensive end. Who will step up and be that sort of consistent offensive presence that, they need?
I am very confused about my opinions on this Notre Dame team. I really like Plachi Young. I think he'll have a really good freshman season. He's really turned heads quickly in South Bend. I like Archer Baldwin. I like Demir Dance. I like Anwar Urquhart B. I like Credence Christian. this team is very experienced. They only have one freshman, and that's Blake Young, and I think that there's a lot that could go right for this team. I think they can hold their own against some teams, but I think they're still not really where they need to be.
Yeah, I think definitely while they'll be a great defensive team, they're definitely going to have their struggles at the same time, this upcoming SimWorld U season. And moving on, going further up into the Northeast, we've got the Syracuse Orange. And this is a team whose success, I think, will be dependent on the offensive output of Azud Abdul-Rahman and De'Aaron Cruz.
De'Aaron Cruz has potential, but I don't think he's really there yet. This team has a lot of upside. I like John Hudgens at 7 foot 212. I like Aiden Whiting. I like both of those guys. Azad Abdul-Rahman is a great shooter. Cruz is another one where I'm a little bullish on what he is capable of, but I don't know if it's going to be this season. This Orange team has some talent in year 2 with Adrian Autry, but I'm not convinced that they're the players in the ACC right now. Like they have talent, but there's upside, but there's a lot of question marks, and I don't really think that this is their year.
And I think I can kind of agree with you there that there are question marks with this team. And another area that is of concern with me in the Orange and Coach Adrian Autry's team is their interior offense. John Hudgens plays more of kind of a stretch big style. Aiden Whiting, more defensive minded. I think generating offense in the paint especially is also going to be another area of struggle for them. And moving on to the next school, who I know you are very high on, the Virginia Cavaliers.
I know you're not a believer, but I am. Tyson Simpson is hurt. If they had Tyson Simpson, I think they'd be the favorites in this conference. But they don't. They still have Johnny Baldwin and freshman Cole Webb. Johnny Basketball, absolute freak. I don't know what else you want me to say about that guy. This Virginia team with that duo could have a very good season. I like Elliott Terrell. I'm hearing some good things about Quentin Rye over with the Cavaliers, and I don't count out Tony Bennett. I know a lot of the love is going to the same 3 teams, and this team has the talent to compete with them. We've seen Virginia win a national championship recently. We've seen Virginia struggle in March recently. We've seen a lot with this team, but I think this is one of the better Virginia teams we've seen in recent memory.
And let me be clear. I'm not saying that, Virginia, it's impossible for them to have a good season. I've said it before and I'll say it again. You know what Johnny Baldwin is going to bring to the floor. But Cole Webb, to me, is a one-trick pony. I think he definitely needs to step it up on the defensive end of the floor and be a little more consistent when it comes to knocking down shots. But one other guy I wanted to mention here, who I think could be a big-time potential breakout player in SimWorld U this season, Sire Matthews, out of the Bronx. I think he is definitely going to have a critical role in that backcourt as well. And I think he could emerge as an elite player in SimWorld U.
I don't hate that. I really like this VT squad. I really like Neely Cox. I like Braxton Schuyler. I like Travion Novick. They're just going to have to face Kayvon Jackson and Cooper Flagg consistently. I think this team could do some damage and give some teams some good effort, but I don't think they're really in the same upper echelon tier as some of the other teams in this ACC.
Right, and, Virginia Tech, like you just said, there is talent on this team. Mike Young has put together a team with talent on it, and you look at guys like Deontay Height in Taysom, Kaiser, Canyon, Paris, and Von Rushing. What concerns me is backcourt production.
The wing production will be there.
The wing production we know will be there. They have a little bit of size, but I am concerned and nervous about the production that they will have from their backcourt. Because the depth in the backcourt really is not there.
I like Canyon Perez. I think he could have a good season in his senior campaign. He's a pretty solid offensive player, quick with the basketball in his hands, decent shooter. Don't sleep on him.
No, definitely. I will say this. ACC, very tough, very deep. There is not a single team I would sleep on. But
some teams are in different spots than others, is how I would characterize it.
Very much so. Very much so. And to wrap the show up today, talking about the Wake Forest Demon Deacons. You know, one of the more experienced teams in all of SimWorld U, which, you know, experience is never a bad thing. They bring in one incoming freshman, in Carter Fields. What do you think the ceiling is for this Wake Forest team?
I think they have a very high ceiling. I think they have a great duo of J.C. Graham and Carter Fields. I think that's going to be a great PNR duo. But here's my issue with Carter Fields. As talented as I know he is, as what I've seen from him in his SimWorld prep days, I think he's a little bit more of a project. He's 6'9", 247, going on the defensive end, but I think there's a lot of untapped potential there, and I think he will be the benefactor of the 2-year rule for SimWorld U players, because I think that in his second season with Wake Forest, he'll end up really wreaking some havoc on this conference, but this season I think it's going to be a lot of a learning curve for him, and it might take him some time to adjust, but J.C. Graham and Jalen Tucker and Luka Jesse, that's a great trio. That's why I'm in on this Wake Forest team. I think they're the most underrated team in the conference. I think they're the most underrated team in all of SimWorld U. They weren't ranked in the initial top 25, and I thought they should have been.
Yeah, I think they were definitely a team that was slightly snubbed in that one. But also looking at the Demon Deacons, for me, they're in a very interesting situation, you know. They're loaded with experience, but then they have, you know, a potential future build-around focal point type of player in Carter Fields, who I think is a little bit more of a long-term, you know, developer, like you said. But at the same time, with their experience, they're very much, you know, in a win-now position, if that makes sense. So I think that definitely having, you know, a guy like Carter Fields, but also having that experience, it kind of puts them in a unique position of, you know, having a guy that you need to develop long-term, but also being in a win-now situation.
I think that Steve Forbes is really cooking something here in Winston-Salem. So I think that we should see Wake Forest back in Hoopsteria. I'll be surprised if they're not the sleeper of this conference.
Yeah, I think they could definitely... I agree with you that they could definitely make some noise in the ACC. But that's going to do it for today's episode of the J-Rock Show. JK, it was a pleasure having you on, my man. I look forward to next week.
Yeah, next week we're going to be talking about the American. I hope you like, subscribe, comment on the video, watch it as much as you can, send it to anybody you can, and talk about this as much as you can. Give us some love, and we hope to see you back next week.
All right, y'all. You heard the man. We'll see you next week. And as always, see the game, be the game.